Hey guys, this is Point of View, a podcast where a creator tells me all about their story to create their own chosen work of art, and let's get into it. Thomas J Campbell is a comic book creator and writer. For the last couple of years, he's been creating and releasing his own self-released comic book series entitled Abyssal Albion. The blog, 3 Million Years, called Abyssal Albion a real page-turner with excellent scenes, art, lettering and storytelling. With 2 issues created and the third about to be released, I caught up with Thomas and he broke down for me where it all started for this Cthulhu-inspired survival horror comic and where he sees this project going.
Hi there, I'm Thomas Campbell, the UK-based writer and creator of Abyssal Albion, the Eldritch survival horror comic series. So, I first got into creating comics, it was at the start of the first lockdown when the pandemic first hit. Prior to that, I'd been writing short films and features with some friends as part of the filmmaking collective Deadbolt Films. Sadly, when the pandemic hit, we couldn't meet up anymore. So it kind of left a bit of a creative black hole. So not really knowing what to do with myself, I actually had the idea of return to one of my first passions, which was comic books. I'd always been I was one of those massively into early 90s X-Men when I was younger, and the Dark Horse Alien series. And then as I got older, I then moved into more a lot of the Fantagraphic stuff, and then eventually I kind of circled back around to X-Men. Actually, I think it was when Grant Morrison released their X-Men series that I first got back into more superhero side of comics and more mainstream comics again. So that's always been a big part of my life. So when the pandemic finally hit, it was a case of, you know what, I am going to take this idea that I've had. It's been stewing in the back of my brain for quite a while, and I'm going to run with it. So Abyssal Albion is about a sister and her younger brother as they try and traverse a post-apocalyptic Britain, one that's now swarmed with crazy cultists, mind-shattering monsters, and books of forbidden knowledge. I like to think of it as a cross between the Call of Cthulhu and The Row by Cormac McCarthy. It has a very, very bleak feel to it. One that's captured absolutely fantastically by Wayne Loudon, our artist, who does it all in this absolutely stark and lovely black and white. So when I was first looking for an artist to come on board, I knew I always wanted something that had like a punk rock DIY energy to it. That was one of the biggest stipulations for me. I wanted something that was grimy and fit in with what you'd expect to find in a post-apocalyptic book. Something that was still quite visceral, all that stuff, that a really nice energy to it, that could create the really horrific moments of violence, and juxtapose that against some nice touching scenes as well. When Wayne Loudon sent me his stuff, I was gobsmacked. It was this is perfect for what I want to do. This is ideal. Absolutely love it. And he really does have quite a unique style, I think. There's not many I see with it. He does it all on paper and then inks it all himself, and it's fantastic. So when combined with Ken Reynolds' lettering, which his stuff is incredible. So combined with that, and then last issue we then brought on Trilby Black as I want to say colorist, and I guess she is, but it's all still black and white. But she introduced these incredible grey tones that just elevated it even more. It really made it quite punchy. So for a black and white book, it's incredible. The greys and blacks and everything. It just fits. It's what you'd expect of a post-apocalyptic book. It's what you'd want. And I'm so lucky to have them as a team on board, helping realize this really bleak world that is Abyssal Albion. The Lovecraft influence, his entire back catalogue is probably the biggest influence. I hope that we carry on long enough that we'll be able to touch on at least most of it in some form. But yeah, as mentioned before, the Road by Cormac McCarthy is definitely one of the other bigger influences in which we try to emulate via not having names for the first main characters, the brother and sister in our book, and within the Road you've got man and boy. So that's probably the bigger influence there, though that is due to change in ours. Then on top of that, it's a horror book. There's a lot of violence, a lot of gore. I wanted to try and keep it quite pulpy, so I'd certainly think that series like Hellboy and the early Dark Horse Aliens comics as well, they were quite gory and quite visceral in the way that they portrayed their violence, but it was all done, there was like a tongue-in-cheek feel to it, and I feel that probably influences the way that we do that more than anything. It's not hyper realistic, but there's still a sense of just chaotic violence there, which I think amplifies the horror elements of our book. So yeah, they're definitely our biggest influences for sure. So in the first issue, we're introduced to brother and sister. Brother he's the younger of the two. He's still a young lad. He's he hasn't had much life experience. He's still a bit naive. He's headstrong. Feels like he's got something to prove. Whereas on the other hand, you've got sister. Now sister's had a life before the awakening. She's experienced love and all that side of things, but which has made her a bit more stoic, riddled with survivor's guilt. She's had this paternal role that's been thrust upon her, and this has led her to be a bit more untrusting. And I think this is really shown in the first issue, where they meet Nathan, an ex-police officer who offers to take him into his home, often safe harbour. And they're sat down, they're having a meal, and Nathan starts to describe his backstory, and then brother goes to blurt out everything that's happened to them. Like, he reveals that sister's got a girlfriend and all that, and she quickly puts a stop to it. She's like, nope, silence. And then it then progresses, and you learn that she was quite right to be that untrusting. It's not a bad thing in this world to not really trust others. Nathan, things go very, very dark from that point. And then, obviously, you move on to the second issue. And the second issue, once again, I think where the first issue started straight with the horror, they're running away from a cultist, they're trying to flee, trying to survive. The second issue shows another aspect of the relationship. You learn a little bit more about them. You do see the more of the paternal side of sister trying to take place. She's trying to be more supportive. There's a whole scene where they're discussing about what birthdays used to mean and how they no longer have their parents around and all that sort of thing. You learn more of them as siblings. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a horror story. We could tell a heartwarming story about a brother and sister surviving, in a world that's changed. But we're going to throw some really nasty stuff at them. I mean, first issue, straight off the bat, we have a cultist screaming, running at them, like shouting, like prayer to its dark god. And then they're rescued by this man that turns out not to be who he really is, and has them locked away in his house. And then in the second issue, you learn more that sister's girlfriend might have been taken off by this cult that now cult of fishmen that now live across the coast of the British Isles, setting up churches in old piers. There's a really nice page that Wayne has done where they enter this kitchen and there's just body parts and like fish carcasses and all sorts hanging on the walls. It's absolutely terrifying. It's really, really gruesome stuff, and quite nightmarish. And talking about nightmares, we've even like introduced there's elements of the Dreamlands that got introduced in the first issue. So we could introduce more creatures on that side of things, and that's going to play a lot more in issue 3 as well, where we're going to see like more creatures and how they interconnect a bit more as well. So there's a lot of disturbing stuff coming up. Issue 3, it's going to be special. I think that's our nightmare issue at the moment, whereas the other two have just been they're terrifying and scary in their own right and quite disturbing. I think issue 3 we're ramping it up a lot more, and you're going to learn kind of a bit more than what went down as well prior to issue 1, and that itself actually ties in quite nicely in regards to the fictional newsreel we did. So I've already mentioned that I made short films with a group of friends with Deadbolt Films. During lockdown, when I first got the idea of I wanted to tell this apocalyptic horror story comic, I sort of reached out to them. There was a competition going anyway for a horror short film, and I was like, look, I want to make like a really good punchy campaign video that told a story without giving too much away of the actual story itself. Like, I think there was so much going on in the news at the time, and it gave me this idea of why don't we do like a series of news reports that were all spliced together that sort of told a bit of a story, and sort of would give someone a bit of a backstory to the awakening event. The sun went dark and then everyone started going mad and all that sort of side of things. I sort of reached out to my film buddies and we sent them script, gave each of them parts. It's quite funny. So got like my producer there, we got like the director there, Gav and John, and we got a couple of the Deadbolt crew like did some voice acting and puppet work for us. It was a fun thing actually. We basically gave everyone little parts and we just said, look, could you go away, film this, send it back, and then John edited it all and put in all the graphics and that, and it just came out so well. We actually won. We did enter it into a short film and won like best editing or something like that. But yeah, it was such a fun little thing to do. Certainly because everyone was just sat in their bedrooms and home offices at the time. So it was nice that it was quite funny. It was a good laugh. And I think it really set the scene for what we're going for within the comic as well. It's not too serious, but it's still quite horrifying. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds for these characters. Certainly, issue 3 is going to introduce a whole new dynamic to them, where you're going to learn who they are, what their connections to the Dreamlands are, what happened to their parents, all this side of things. It's going to be quite an interesting thing to see how that all goes down, and certainly in future books as we build upon what we're now laying. We are just laying the groundwork. We haven't really got into the very meat of how this world is, and that's going to be quite exciting. I mean, going forward, I personally would love to see like other collaborators come on board and help us expand more into this world. We've got that little short film, and that was great to have other people get involved. But it'd be great to have like other comic creators come over and tell stories and that within it. I think it's such a interesting world to tell stories in. I mean, God, wouldn't it be great to be able to tell like Abyssal Australia or something like that at some point? That would be amazing. It's just I'm very excited, and I think there's some really great places we can take this book, and certainly with the characters, they're in for a rough time, but it's going to be fun. So obviously thanks for listening to me ramble. Hopefully found it interesting. Hopefully you take some away. You got a better idea of what the comic is and what we're aiming for. I just want to, obviously, I'm going to mention a couple of projects so you know you can find me. I'm pretty much living on Twitter these days, and you can find me under my own personal account, which is party_lard, or you can find us on Abyssal Albion, just all one word on there. Do obviously check that out. You can find any of our crowdfunding details through that. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We pump out pretty consistent updates. We always giving shout outs to other campaigns and stuff like that. We love the community as such, so please do follow us. I personally have another project that's due to come out very shortly, that I'm working with a fantastic artist called Martin, and that project's called Grimland. We'll be heading to Zoop, where we'll be launching our funding for that, which is going to be like a grim, dark, futuristic look into the far future of humanity. The first issue is all set up for this universe, but we have plans to take it beyond. It's going to be quite the epic adventure. Once again, I keep coming back to Aliens, but think Alien meets Warhammer. It's going to be that is the thing we're looking at. So yeah, please check that out. That's also under Grimland_comic on Twitter. We'll be releasing more information about that shortly. On top of that, you've got Deadbolt Films. You can find us on YouTube if you want to see a couple of the other little shorts on that we've made. We've had a couple of Lovecraftian shorts that have been in the HP Lovecraft Film Festival. Please do check out our YouTube channel, and we've also got a website. You can just Google it and find it. I think it's something like deadboltfilms.co.uk. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Thomas J Campbell for appearing on the show. If you missed it, then check out Abyssal Albion by searching ABYSSAL Albion, ALBION on Kickstarter. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, then please leave a 5-star review on the My Kind of Weird feed, or subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. But for now, guys, I'll be back with the main My Kind of Weird episode next week. And for now, stay weird.